So tonight we're going to talk about obstacles to success, because we want to be successful. And by success, I mean creating the home that you want, creating the level of obedience and peace and harmony in your home that you want. We're also going to talk about husband and wife relationships and the importance that it has for our kiddos. And then next week is filling their bucket. And we'll talk about love languages and gender differences and dealing with the needs of little boys versus little girls, personalities. And then complicating circumstances like, whoops, my kids are older. I didn't know anything about this until now. What do I do with older kids, blended families, special needs kids? And then character training, helping our kids learn manners and having good habits, and working on what the culture calls, instead of your IQ, your EQ, your emotional quotient, your ability to be flexible and adapt and pleasant and all those kinds of things. And then the biblical foundation for all of this. And the reason I put that at the end is I just find that parents are usually just in need of something practical. What can I do right now to begin to establish some order, bring some peace to my home? Ultimately, we do this because God tells us to do this, and He has not specific, okay, do this as a parent, do that as a parent, but He has specific principles. And so that is the basis that will help you make decisions about how am I going to deal with this behavior, what behaviors are acceptable. And then the last one is the issue of spanking and whether or not you should spank, and if you choose to spank your children, when it would be appropriate, and kind of a biblical framework of that, because that's got a real bad name in our society, and rightfully so in some cases, poorly done and incorrectly done in some cases. And anyway, so we're going to explore that at the very end. So that's kind of where we are. So tonight I want to talk about obstacles to success. So I'm studying homeopathy, and one of the phrases they use is obstacles to cure. So why is it that this particular remedy is not working? And so you look at, like, for example, a parent brings this child who's got all this energy, a diagnosis of ADD or whatever, and they're applying homeopathic principles and choosing a remedy and administering the remedy, and it's not working well. Then they find out that mom's feeding the child Pop-Tarts all day long. So that would be an obstacle to a cure, So for us as parents, there are obstacles sometimes to us getting a successful result, if you will, for lack of a better word, with what we're doing with the kiddo. So I want to talk about some of those things. We kind of in the beginning talked about roadblocks, and those were more philosophies that kind of interfere with a biblical principle. But for us in our homes, day to day, some of the obstacles to our success could be, first and foremost, it's usually on us, and that is we're inconsistent. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but that was my main problem. I knew what to do for the most part. Once I knew what to do, I knew what to do. Even throughout the day, I knew what to do. But sometimes I just had other things that I would prefer, and you have to stop whatever you're involved in and deal with the child. So unfortunately, the sad truth is when we are inconsistent, we ourselves are demonstrating a lack of self-control because we are choosing the wrong thing. We are not controlling our emotions. Our emotions say, oh no, there's this YouTube video I want to watch, or oh no, I want to go to this Bible study, and it interferes with our day and gets the kids all wonky in their naps or whatever. And so it is our own personal lack of self-discipline that is causing us sometimes to not be consistent with the training that we're trying to implement in our home. And I want to, it's easy to say, well, just be consistent. Oh, well, wow, that's profound, If it were that easy, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But I do want to give us hope. I had a couple of verses I wanted to read. Okay, Galatians 5. You know what I'm going to read, probably. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. So the fruit of the Spirit, being aligned with God and being in obedience to Him and walking in His principles, the fruit of that is self-control. Now, boom, we don't just get self-control, we learn self-control, but it is a fruit of the Spirit. It is something that God equips us with as parents to help us to be diligent, to help us to be consistent. And when the days get long and morning sickness reigns supreme and you can barely crawl yourself out of bed, and that is the reality. There's just no getting around that. Being a mom is hard, and being a pregnant mom is hard if you're battling morning sickness or whatever, fatigue, whatever, the realities of life are hard. And if I may be so bold, sometimes we can, in a demonstration of our lack of self-control, choose ease, choose our own comfort. Now, I'm not saying suck it up, Mom, and crawl out of bed, but we know when we're being soft and lazy. And let me read this to you. This is Hebrews 12, 1-3. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart. And I do think in the throes of it, when it's hard and maybe you're not seeing the results that you want to see and no one around you seems to be putting forth any effort, and you feel alone and isolated because is there any family? Is there any family we can go visit, where my kids won't be terrorized or, whatever, or any family I can bring over to my house and their children won't, destroy my house. Is anybody doing this? We work as unto the Lord. And I think this is an admonishment to us to not grow weary. This is important work that we do. And I feel like this is our encouragement that, yeah, it's hard. And, and he says, run with endurance the race that's set before us. Not like just, hang out and it'll all be fine. The implication, of course, he was, the big deal at the time was the Olympics, so they understood the athletic references. But the point is, this is not easy, and this requires sometimes massive effort on our part, and we can not grow weary. We have the support and the guidance of the Holy Spirit to help us to not grow weary as we do this. And I want to encourage you, don't grow weary when it seems hopeless. And I can't remember if I've told y'all, my youngest had food allergies, and it dramatically, we didn't realize at the time, but it dramatically affected his behavior. And, by number 7, I knew what to do, and I was pretty consistent. Although I was tired, I was 41 when he was born. I was a little tired. But I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, it's hopeless. It's not sinking in. Even his brothers would say, it's like he doesn't get it. And he didn't, because he had these food allergies that were getting in the way. But he was still misbehaving, and I had to deal with, the behaviors. And so I know what it's like to feel like you're not making any progress, even though you're trying. And so I think we can all be encouraged to run with endurance the race set before us, because as a stay-at-home mom and as a dad in charge of a family, it is the race set before us. There is nothing that we need to be attending to. Our primary relationship with God, and then our spouse, and we'll get to that. Y'all look like you need to tell me something. I'm sorry. Oh, you're like, we need to interrupt. Anyway, so let's not grow weary. And I say again, to have kindred spirits, even if you're not exactly on the same page, you're at least in the same book because you're here together. And to have families who are at least making the attempt is huge. And so band together and encourage one another. So number 1. Sometimes our problem, the obstacle to our success, is our own lack of consistency, which demonstrates our lack of self-discipline and self-control. And the second thing is directed to us girls, if you don't mind. Corey, you can just... Don't mind. Okay. But it might surprise you what I'm going to say. You're probably thinking, oh, where can I go? As parents, I'm trying to choose my words very carefully. We got to be really careful. We don't have to be perfect. God is not surprised that He gives children to imperfect humans. But we need to be aware that everything we do, our children are watching. You know, everything they say, if you use a bad word one time, that's the word they're going to use when you have people over for dinner. You know, they're going to repeat that one word or whatever they've heard on TV one time, they're going to repeat it. And so, ladies, and I include myself in this, we need to be sure that we are modeling the correct response to authority. And we've talked about this a little bit before. The husband is the authority figure. And the authority structure in the home is the husband is the head, and the wife is under his authority. And we are to submit to our husbands as he submits to God. Everyone is under authority. And if you and I, as women, are not submitting ourselves to our husband's authority, we are demonstrating rebellion for our kids every single day. So this looks in practicality sometimes like this. We're probably not... making gestures at our husband. If he says something we don't like, we're probably not doing that. But sometimes we can go, when he says something about the kids, or when he disciplines the kids, we can jump right in and correct him and sigh in exasperation at his ineptness or whatever. And all those things send the message to our children that he is not worthy of the authority that is placed on him. And I say this because, if I may be so bold, if you and I as women are not under proper authority in our home, we are not under God's authority. You cannot be in rebellion against your husband and not also be in rebellion against God. A serious thing to be in rebellion against God. So I hope you'll indulge me this frank talk. So Dad is the ultimate authority, and this is what I see sometimes. Proverbs 14. Tonight's kind of heavy, isn't it? Okay. Proverbs 14:1 says this: the wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. And I've been on the planet a while, and I cannot tell you how many Christian women I have seen who have torn down their own homes with their own hands, with their own mouth, with their own complaints about their husband in front of him, in front of the children, asking for prayer with their sister, and they rehearse their husband's faults, and the children hear these things. Not that our husbands are perfect, I'm not saying that. Not that we shouldn't address concerns with our husbands, or even ask for prayer from our girlfriends if we're in a situation. My point is, just be aware of your attitude toward your husband, especially in front of your children. Now, I'm not telling you to do one thing be one person behind closed doors and another person in public. I'm saying your kids pick up what we say and our attitudes. And even, I'll tell you a little secret about men growing up married to one and then raising 6 of them. The fastest way to lose the help from the men in your life is to criticize everything they do. So whatever, the diaper, if it's on backwards and the clothes are dirty, but Dad did it, who cares? The diaper's on and the clothes are on, and who cares? If they make a sandwich and it's on white bread, and it's bologna or some horrible something, who cares? He fed the kids. And I'm not saying that in a patronizing way about, oh, that's all they could do. I'm just saying, be grateful for the help that you get from your husband, and let him do kids his way. And it's so funny because you see that when the wife edifies her husband in front of her children, it doesn't matter what he does. The kids think he's the greatest thing ever because that's what Mom said. He's the greatest thing ever. So edify your husband. remember that you are modeling for your little ones. And especially, it goes both ways. If you're in rebellion toward your husband, if you're condescending and think he's a, inept and all that kind of stuff, you're modeling for your girls how to treat men. And you're modeling for your boys how women treat men. So it's a huge responsibility for us to properly interact with our husbands and show them the respect that they're due. Not that they're perfect, neither are we. We're not even going there. So I'll leave us girls alone for a little bit. So the third thing I think that can really get in the way of our finding success in this venture of child training is excusing the behavior, attributing it to a wrong cause. So I mentioned that my son had food sensitivities, and it really did affect his behavior. And when we figured out what the sensitivities were and removed those offending foods, his behavior dramatically changed. But he's still a sinner. He's still a kid. He still wanted things his own way. He just didn't have a clouded head from the allergies. But same thing with my handicapped child, and I see this a lot in the circles I run in with families with handicapped children. Oh, that's just because they have Down syndrome. Oh, that's just because they have ADD. Oh, that's just because they're autistic. And the truth of the matter is, whether it's food allergies, whether it's autism, oh, that's just her personality. She's fiery. I hear that. I think, oh, that means she's bossy. That's code for she's bossy and obnoxious. No, she's fiery and, assertive. And I think, oh, she's really bossy. So all those things are true, but they don't excuse sinful behavior. And especially if you have special needs or fiery personalities or whatever it is euphemism we want to say, if that's what we're doing, or if it's in fact a real issue. The world is not going to be kind. The world doesn't care if Pumpkin has a fiery personality. Pumpkin has to rein that in when she gets on the job site because the boss doesn't like her fiery personality. And my handicapped child, when she has a habit that is offensive or a behavior that is offensive, the world is not going to look kindly on her. And so I show love when I help her obey, when I help my child who couldn't obey because he couldn't control himself when he was under the influence, if you will, of these foods that were wigging him out. I showed him love by continuing to hold him to the standard because we continue to be held to the standard. So my point is this. All these things may be true. Food sensitivities, disabilities, personalities, whatever. That all may be true. And we are sinful creatures. And Mark was just talking this morning, and I thought this was so cool that Proverbs 17:15 says this: "He who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the righteous, both of them alike are an abomination to the Lord." And he was just talking about that because God is holy and perfect, he cannot abide in justice, and he cannot be unjust either. And we are God's representatives in our families. So I hear people sometimes say, oh, I love them too much to discipline them. Baloney. If you love them enough, you do what is right for them, okay? So excusing their behavior, thinking we're extending grace is not showing love. We are the position of authority. We are to administer justice. We are to hold the misbehaving kid accountable for their behaviors in the same way that we praise the one who behaves. And so it's not godly love to not hold your kids accountable for their behaviors, no matter what the extenuating circumstance is. Now, I'm not talking about a little infant, holding an infant accountable for, if they're pitch a fit or whatever, like sometimes infants do. Obviously, we're balancing this with their developmental age. So I think you understand what I'm saying. But it's easy. I've been there. It's easy when you get tired. And I think I've admitted this to y'all. Sometimes the child who shall remain nameless, Jack, he didn't care. He's 19. He didn't care anymore. I would let things go. He was the one wigged out with food allergies. And I would just be so weary of disciplining him and stopping him and protecting everyone from him, protecting the things he was destroying. And I just let things go, and his older brothers would say, "You're going to let him get away with that?" And I think, yes, I'm I'm just tired, I'm just tired. And so I get it, but let's refer back to that run with endurance the race set before us. But anyway, so I get it, it's hard. But let's not excuse their behavior and attribute it to a wrong cause. One last example of this. You hear all kinds of things out there, right? And I remember when Hannah was diagnosed in utero, she was diagnosed with Down syndrome. And you can't believe the things people told us would cure her Down syndrome, And I hear that, and I'm a fan of all these kind of alternative methods. I heard that chiropractic care would cure her of her Down syndrome. I heard from my dyslexic sons that chiropractic care or herbs or vitamins or homeopathic remedies would cure my son of his dyslexia, would cure a kid of ADD. Well, help with the symptoms, yes, but cure the issue, not necessarily. So just be wary of lumping it all into it's just fill in the blank with the diagnosis or fill in the blank with the deficiency of vitamins or the extra chromosome or whatever. Is that making sense? I feel like I kind of got off in the weeds there. Okay, so another obstacle to cure, if you will, obstacle to success is the blind spot. So the problem with the blind spot is it's a blind spot. You can't see it. So I'm just going to tell you, here's where you need to look. The kid who's most like you is most likely to be your blind spot because what could be wrong? They're just like me, And so just being aware that that's the one I probably need to pay attention and evaluate, what I'm doing, that can really be an eye-opener. Either if you have it's helpful for the kid who's like you if you already have a healthy wariness about your traits that you're seeing in your little one. If you don't have that, then it's a real blind spot because you think, oh, look, they're just like me, a chip off the old block. So I suggest this. I've never had anybody take me up on it. I'm positive I can't imagine why they wouldn't, but I think your little camera that you have in your home for your babysitters, you can watch your babysitter, film your life, film your family, show it to me, and I'll tell you your blind spots, all right? I'll tell you, I see a habitual thing with this kiddo and a habitual thing with that kiddo and not with this one and inconsistent treatment. Anyway, so, thanks, Bev. You're telling us our blind spot is a hindrance, but we don't know what it is. But that's just a tip. Usually it's the kid who's the most like you that is the most likely to get, their issues are likely to get overlooked. Just a little heads up there. That's a freebie. So, lack of commitment to the big picture and the overarching principles that we've been talking about is a hindrance to your success, because without stepping back, what is it I'm trying to accomplish? We reduce ourselves to just trying to follow a set of rules. What was it she told me I shouldn't let my kids do? What were those 21 rules that I shouldn't? We reduce ourselves to just a set of rules without this bigger picture. The bigger picture is I am modeling in my home, my husband and I are modeling my home, godly behavior, God's order in his authority, God's order in relationships. All this is like this lab, that my children are learning in. And it's in the heat of the moment, it's hard to step back and remember that the bigger picture is this is what we're doing. Because when we zoom out for that bigger picture, it might require us to make changes to our schedules, changes to our own personal habits, it can be changes to what we eat. It could be a whole myriad of things. And it's just easier to go to default into survival mode. And that was the whole point of these series of workshops was that's what I see is parents just throwing their hands up in exasperation and just surviving, and that's the best they hope for. And there's so much more than just survival, but it requires that we understand we have a biblical responsibility. Train up a child in the way he should go. I mean, that's a proverb. But in Deuteronomy, it talks about, keeping these things in front of your family as you go about your day. And so it is a responsibility. And I feel like in many ways the church has been lax in passing along the responsibility. We don't just have a responsibility to pass along biblical truth to our kids. We have a responsibility to guide and shape their behavior until such time as they make a decision on their own to follow Jesus. And so we, I think, are probably better at filling their minds with stories from the Word and verses and those kinds of things, and we let the behaviors slide, and we tell ourselves, oh, but they know all their verses for Awana. And yeah, they're little terrors when the neighbor kids come over to play, and they, the 4-year-old whacks the 2-year-old all the time on the head. But it's almost as if we feel like if we just fill them with the Word enough, it'll change their hearts and change their behavior. And the Word never goes out void, but we're also part of the process. So the big picture of this is God's order, putting children, little vulnerable children, in our hands as fallen humans. I remember when we brought our oldest home from the hospital, we put him at the end of the bed and we thought, oh my gosh, what do we do now? They sent him home with us. What were they thinking? We don't know anything, and God knows that. And so it's this mutual growth thing. The kids are there so we can shepherd them, and then we get a glimpse of our own hearts when we watch ourselves, interact with our kids. So over time, I think as a society, we have helped parents less and less and less with how do I do it? Yeah, that's all well and good, but what do I do in the day-to-day, And I think partially that's because of drift. Our pastor's been talking about drift. Let me read this to you. What little the church may tell us about our kids, it's Hebrews 2. This is what we do, I think. We don't do this. Hebrews 2:1. For this reason, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. Now, he's talking about spiritual truths and theological truths, and they were getting off into error. But I'm seeing more broadly, we need to pay attention to the ways God does tell us we're supposed to interact with one another. Instead of drifting off little by little, we drift off into cultural norms. And we've talked about that, the idea that if you just love them enough, they'll behave. If you just build their self-esteem enough, they'll behave. If you just have a family bed or have home births or pick your thing, then everything will be all right. And that's just not true. And we've drifted away from God's truth, and we don't even know, we're parenting just like everybody else. And we ought not be parenting just like everybody else, because we ought not be just like everybody else. All right? So let's segue into the husband and wife relationship. I guess Ben's not going to be here for that. So you're free to just say whatever, right?
You have to watch the video later, though.
You could say that the camera flubbed up for a few minutes, and that was when she said that about the foot rub.
She said it in love.
Yes. Okay. Here's another one of the things where we've drifted from biblical truth into culture, and that is the child-parent relationship is paramount, and that is not the case. The primary relationship is between us and God, and the next relationship God instituted was the husband and wife, and that is the next one of importance. And then the next one is the children. And it is important for our kids that we get this right. Again, I talked about you're modeling for your sons, you're modeling for your daughters, what is the proper order of relationships. But this husband and wife thing is another thing that gets trashed in our culture as if it's superfluous, as if the guys are superfluous, or if marriage is, not totally necessary as long as you're committed. And no. God thinks it's very important, or he wouldn't have said it in his word, all right? So the husband-wife relationship is foundational to our children, not their self-esteem. It is the security of the husband and wife's relationship that is the basis of a stable child's life, all right? So it is a burden when we place on our children, when we place our relationship with them above the relationship with the husband and wife. So if you understand what I mean. Oh, honey, I just need to go sleep with Susie tonight. She's just frightened and I just need to sleep with her. And that one night turns into 2 nights, turns into 3 weeks, turns into mom spends all of her time in bed with a kid instead of in bed with her husband. And we put our children in an unstable position because they're not equipped to navigate their world because they're children. We as adults are equipped, should be equipped to navigate our world, and it is up to us to set the stable platform on which they build.